So Naomi and I are chatting today. We wanted to do a kind of like asynchronous webinar on like what it's like to apply and interview for C-suite level positions. So a lot of folks contributed really wonderful questions, and we're going to work to kind of like our way through some of those questions. Hopefully we'll hit a lot of the big themes. So just to introduce myself, so I'm Kristin Saybe. I'm the career coach with NRG. And Naomi, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Naomi Roth-Gaudette. I named the firm after myself, NRG Consulting Group. My background's in, organizing and advocacy work.
Great. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of like the big themes of the questions that were submitted. So a lot of folks were interested in like ideas and motivation for really effective and efficient searches for executive level roles, especially like in this current moment. Also just confidence, how to build confidence in making the jump to higher level roles, and switching sectors as well. And then just more information in general about job search resources right now. So, like working with recruiting firms was a big theme, or using AI and how to utilize LinkedIn. So we're going to dive into some questions. So the first one was, what are the kind of key differences, do you think, between an executive search and a non-C-suite role? And how should the search strategy kind of change for executives?
Yeah, I like that question because it kind of reminds me why we decided to do this webinar, where I feel like applying for jobs in your 20s, like first job out of college, second job is very different than applying, in your 40s or 50s or 60s. So, right, the question is, well, what are those key differences? So let's just talk about those. Like, I often feel like one of the things I say to people is, if you're looking for a job, like, stop applying for jobs. Like, people often call me and they'll say, Naomi, I need advice on applying for jobs. I'm like, well, how's it going? And they always start with like, they pull up some spreadsheet. I'm sure you've had the same conversation where they pull up some spreadsheet and it's like, well, in the last month I applied for 6 jobs. And the month before that I applied for 8 jobs. And like, it's all focused on the number of jobs that people are applying for. And I just think like applying for jobs is really good when you're first getting started, but when you're, I'm just going to say, a grown-up, or when you're looking for an executive level role or a C-level role, it's not all about applying for jobs. I really think it's way more about networking and outreach and talking to people. Eventually, you do need to apply for the job, but that shouldn't be your focus. Your focus should be on networking and outreach. And I can say a little bit more about why, but I'm just curious, Kristin, if that resonates with you.
Yeah, I mean, I just think there are just so many fewer of these C-suite level positions. So if you're applying, you need to be, and when it comes to C-suite positions, they're looking for very specific qualifications and experiences. So if you're having a lot of discernment, then you're just going to be applying to fewer roles. And the other thing is that most organizations know way before they post the job that these transitions are happening. So ideally, you're talking to people and know about the change in the executive director, the change in these VP level roles, like before it's ever posted. Too.
Yeah, right. I know of jobs, that we're probably going to post in January or September right now, even though it's only April. The other thing I think about is, when we meet with a client, when they say, okay, we need to hire a new executive director, we need a new chief of staff, one of the things that I always make a part of that discovery phase, and a bunch of my conversations are like, okay, can we just talk about some people that you could see doing the job? So let's like come to the meeting with LinkedIn profiles, and maybe they're people, I'm not saying they're people that we need to go after and poach, but like just give me an example of people that you could imagine doing it. And a lot of the times, right, most people want somebody who's already in their space, who's already kind of done that exact same job someplace else. which is tricky because I know at some point we're going to talk, well, how do you make a jump? Or I really want to be working on climate or anti-Semitism, whatever the thing is. So it makes it tricky. But I guess I'm just mentioning this now because when we're reviewing applications, I know I shouldn't do this. Right? Like I should be seeing the good in everybody and really looking for opportunities, but that's just not necessarily happening. Like this moment in time, we're just inundated with applications. A job that would normally get 300 people applying is getting more like 700 people applying. So when we're reviewing applications, we're like looking for a reason to say no to somebody. Again, I know we're not supposed to do that, but it's like, I'm like, does this person have exactly what they're looking for? No, forget it. They're in the no pile. Like, I'm just like, I don't know, like the answer is no. What's the question? Like, let's just kind of go through it. No, 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 no. And the one difference to that is and maybe this is just me, but like if somebody introduces me to someone and they're like, hey, Naomi, I think you're going to like this person. Like they've got a little something, even though they might not have exactly what I'm looking for, I will talk to them because I value those relationships and I value, the people in my orbit. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I think other recruiters operate the same way. And I think other hiring managers do too. So again, the emphasis should be on just like reaching out to the people who are making the decisions and can help get you, in the door. Because a lot of the times I know that, if I can get a candidate in front of a hiring manager, they can wow them and they can tell the story and the hiring manager can make the jump from, fine, I know they haven't done X, Y, or Z thing before, but man, I just see potential in what they're talking about. But the hardest part is, getting the door open and making those conversations happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I was also thinking, someone asked like the percentage of break energy investment in different activities. And so I think we're both in agreement that like at the C-suite level, networking is like the number one way that you should be spending your time. And I often tell people, I was like, you still have to show up. Like your materials still have to be good. You still have to do well in the interviews. Like everything else is important. Like no one's going to give you a role, but the networking is going to help get you in the door so that people will consider your candidacy seriously.
Yeah. And man, we could just do a whole hour-long session on what does networking mean and kind of how to do it. But the other thing I'm thinking about is, and again, maybe this depends on if you're like, okay, this is my last hurrah, and then I'm going to retire, or no, I plan to do, maybe I'll be there for a really long time, or maybe I'll do something, I'll run a group, I'll do something for 8 years, and then I'm going to do 2 more things, and then I'm going to, I don't know, go sail around the world or whatever people do in retirement. But it's like, you're not just networking when you're on the job hunt is the way to think about it. Like that crucial moment when you accepted a new job, you're thanking everybody who you met with and you're saying, thanks for meeting with me. You're doing personal emails. You're going back out and saying, let's do virtual coffees. I want to tell you about my journey and how I got here and why. That I think sometimes people are like, they turn on the networking switch of like, okay, now it's time for me to do, instead of, I don't know, my kid is taking health class now in middle school, and it's all about like, it's not just like eating healthy for one meal. It's like the healthy lifestyle, and that's kind of how I think about networking and the job hunt.
Well, sometimes I talk to folks who are like starting to think about maybe transitioning, and like, I'm always like, okay, then you need to start talking to people now. I was like, just even if it's like starting to build those relationships or try and identify which organizations or type of orgs you would be interested in and the types of roles, like, it's never too early to start just like reactivating relationships too.
And it's almost even easier when you're not like about to leave, because a lot of these people they're in pretty big deal roles already. So I'm sure we'll get into it, but there's the confidentiality factor. So sometimes the conversation is easier when it's like, Trump in office. This is a moment for me. I don't think I want to be doing this in 4 years. So I've just started to reach out to people, even though in your head, you're thinking maybe 4 months or maybe 6 months, right? Like the 4 years, that's not like you need to talk to your boss or have some major conversation. That's just a moment in time. Let me reach out. I think your feedback is right. Like the second it's like, oh, I'm thinking about it, you got to act on it.
Start talking to people. Yeah. Another question is, what is the number one tip you have for executive level folks to stick out in applications? Like we all have experiences and skills. How do we have how do we have the like why you question answered for recruiters and hiring managers?
Yeah, I've got thoughts. I'm curious though. You go first. What do you think?
So I think one of the biggest things is showing that in your application materials that you already have relationships in the space that you want to be in. So I'm always like, if you have worked with the foundations that fund that organization, if you talk to someone and they referred you to the position, you mentioned that in your cover letter, like it's like whatever you can do to show them that like, hey, I'm already of this world. Like I already have a base level of knowledge. I think that makes applications stick out for me whenever it is like when you have hundreds of applications, it's like we only have capacity to interview a small percentage. And so like, what's going to make me as a recruiter say like, oh, wait, like this is someone that I want to like make sure that I'm paying attention to. So that's like the biggest thing for me, I recommend.
Yeah, I think I just echo everything you just said. There's other like, little tips or things that you can do. Like I'm always the Google News search, like when people follow the organization in the news and can mention specific that like that freaking press hit in Atlanta, last month was so awesome. Like I'm like, oh wow, you're invested. So relationships and putting those, up front, I think like you have to do that. And then, right, there's this other question. Well, if you don't have the relationships, how do you do it? And that's like, I think Google News search is a tip. I feel like whenever I check my, LinkedIn in messages, like I think I probably try to look at it twice a day, and I probably have about 100 messages of people who are saying, hey, I want to introduce myself. I've applied for a role. I'd love to chat. I basically don't chat with those people. I try to respond with something like, I like your hustle. I don't have time for info interviews. So, is the question, should you do that? It doesn't hurt. But I don't know if that's like the best. I wouldn't put all your eggs in that basket. I would put more of your eggs in the, who do you know on the board? Who do you know that likes them? Who do you know that works with them? But I do think LinkedIn Premium, is worth it. It's like, whatever. Nobody really wants to spend more money when they're looking for a job, but I think it's $65 a month, maybe $75. But what it does is it allows you to message more strangers. So you can message, I think, 30 strangers a month. So again, if the whole thing is like reminding people that they know you or who you know or who you've worked with, it's helpful because it just LinkedIn's an easy platform to do it. The other thing I like about it that I used when I was on the job hunt is you can see who's looking at your profile, which sometimes it just feels really crummy looking for a job. And a lot of times you don't hear back from people for a while, but there's a lot happening behind the scenes. So I would just get like a big ego boost or a confidence boost. And since it's all about your confidence and mojo that you can bring to the interviews, I think if you can swing it, it's a good $65, $75 to spend.
Yep. I always tell people, I was like, if you're going to invest in LinkedIn Premium, then you need to be sending the messages. Like investing in premium will not help your search unless you use it.
Yeah.
But I do think I always tell people reaching out to recruiters is like in the neutral to helpful, like basically reaching out to, like it will never hurt you.
Right.
It could help you. And just seeing your name again, or like, even like, I know Naomi, you send, if people reach out to you an email, then you'll send it to the lead recruiters to follow up with, or like reaching out to me, then I connect people. Like it's not gonna hurt.
Yeah, right. I feel like sometimes I'll respond with that. I really like your hustle, which is just true, right? Like it's, people who can hustle are people who can make things happen.
Mm-hmm. So here's a question about just like, you mentioned this, being on the search is hard. So how can you prevent job search fatigue and getting discouraged, especially after, looking for a long time, and kind of feeling like you're like at the mercy of the situation? There's a lot. Right now, geez, this moment.
It's hard. And then I think it's also hard, like the middle-aged woman, like there's just a lot of, middle-aged white women looking for do-gooder nonprofit type roles. I think it's hard in this moment, like the amount of quality applications that we're getting for jobs. The people aren't necessarily right for the role, but you're like, this person is so impressive.
Talented, really talented people.
I remember when we were pregnant and went to, like birthing classes, my wife wanted natural childbirth. It was like the whole goal, and they were preparing you for it. It was like, has anybody run a marathon before? It's just like, there were no tips. It wasn't like, oh, you can do this and childbirth will be easy. Not that finding a job is anything like childbirth, they're different, but I think there's something in the like, yeah, it's just going to be really long and it's going to be painful at times. And for whatever reason, there's a trend now where people don't get back to people, and that just sucks. So I would just say prepare yourself for it to be long and hard. Like, if someone right now is applying for one of our, like, they applied for a job, whatever, it's almost early May, June, like we're talking after Labor Day is when they're probably starting. And that's like, it's just, it will, to anyone who is looking right now or starting to explore right now, you're looking at maybe a year, maybe two.
Especially for C-suite roles. Like C-suite interview processes take a very long time.
Yeah.
They have to find the right person. They're looking to hire one person who will be in this role for like a long time and shape their
there's just a lot of people, the board is involved, the staff are involved, like all of that, board involvement, that adds probably another 2 months. Staff involvement, that probably adds another month. It just takes time. So the question is like, well, what are the tips? There really aren't any. It's like, I just like the focus on what you can control.
Yes.
So it's not about, it's not about how many offers you're getting or how many times you're getting invited to a second. It's just like I just like it as like, how many people are you talking to each week? Like, just trying to talk to 8 people a week. And then every 6 or 8 weeks, you're following up with the people you met with, 6 or 8 weeks ago with a, hey, thinking about you, you gave me this advice. It's the follow up. And it gets, if you just do the math on that, right? If you're meeting with 8 people a week or 5K people a week, everyone you're meeting with is introducing you to 3 new people, and it's just about how do you stay top of mind? I do these meetings all the freaking time, and you basically forget about people in the next 48 hours by the end of the week, but the people who are good at it, they stay in touch. And every 2 months, they're emailing me something. And then I notice, even though I've never really worked with them or don't know them that well or haven't even interviewed them, I'm like, oh, here's this person that I could think about for this role. But yeah, that's kind of how I think about it. But what's your answer to the like, my gosh, this is so freaking hard?
Yeah. So I do think like having like just knowing that it's going to take longer. I also, then you want it to, like, it just will, especially I think, I've talked to a lot of people in the political space. I'm like, y'all, no one hires as fast as they do on campaigns. Like that is not what happens. So it's going to take a long time. The second thing I would say is, like focus on what is there is a lot that's out of your control. You don't have control over what jobs are posted each week. You don't have control over like what's happening internally at an organization or who's on vacation that needs to help decide on who moves forward. There's just a lot outside. So it's like focus on what is, which is, what roles you're deciding to apply for and invest your time in, and who else you're networking with and talking to. The other thing that I tell folks is like, you should be really focused. Like when you decide to apply for a job, it's like, do all the things in your control, like pull all the levers, like reach out to all the people, submit the high quality application. But then once you've submitted it, you've done everything that you can do, and you just need to move to the next thing.
Yeah.
And it's real. I think it gets tough for people, especially when they're in like advancing in processes. But I'm like, you have to like figure out what your kind of like sustainable application pace is and networking pace, and you just need to keep up with it. Because I think one of the things it is common that I've met when people are like really struggling kind of like mentally staying in it are folks that have been finalists and were like the number 2 choice. I'm like, if you're a finalist, it means you're a good candidate. Like you are a strong candidate, but you just want to keep going. Like, don't take your foot off the gas.
Right.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the, like, you submit it and then move on. Like, don't let it occupy brain space. I don't know. I'm watching my nephew apply for colleges, and it's just like, you just apply And then you wait, right? Colleges, you know that there's whatever, the Ivy League acceptance day, then like, you know, you're going to get the email, but there's nothing you can do. And so you just focus on other things. And there's something that's nice about that.
Yep. Yeah. You just got to move, keep forward. There was this like one person that I was working with, and he kind of like embodied this the most of anyone, where I was like supporting him with finalist interviews. He was a finalist for 2 roles, and they were going really well. And he was like anticipating an offer. But then that week, a recruiter reached out to him and encouraged him to apply for another role. And he was like, yep, I'm going to do it. Like, none of this is finalized. And so he was applying and interviewing for like another role. And I was like, oh, that like embodies the like, yep. Okay, I'm not going to be frantic, but I'm going to keep pursuing until it's like finalized.
Yep.
Another question. So what kind of key skills and experiences or leadership qualities should folks be focusing on to like better prepare for, secure these like COO, VP level, managing director type roles?
That's true, because it's a little bit like you do you. Like, you just show up and you be yourself, and if it's a match and the stars are aligned, go for it. But that's not the question, right? The question is, I want to, you know, like, what can I actually do to get better at this? I'm curious to hear your answer. I know in a lot of the groups that we work with, just the questions around managing across difference, working with people from different backgrounds, you know, how you do that, how you make sure people feel comfortable, how you work with people who, you know, don't approach the work the same way that you do. That just kind of keeps coming up. And maybe, you know, not all organizations are great at it. So maybe that's some place where people can lean in and read more or talk to other people, you know, as they're doing the networking and outreach to figure out what their organization does or how they've approached it in the past. But I do feel like that comes up at all the stages. And I've seen it, you know, rule out candidates who are, you know, have a bunch of other qualities and skills.
Yeah, that is interesting, the cross collaboration. My big idea behind this is like, in the nonprofit and mission driven space, like every flower blooms when it comes to job titles and like responsibilities. So like a COO at X organization, that job description is going to be wildly different from a COO at like Y organization. So one of the things, if you're like thinking about like, okay, I want to like advance, I would break it down more into like, okay, what roles are roles that I see that I would like to have, and what are the key skills and experiences that I might just be, just feel underconfident in or not have experience with, and see if I could get some of that experience in my current role. Huh? Like if it's like a little bit more of the like fundraising, relationship building, or like I want experience with like the payroll or policy development. But there isn't going to be like even like COOs, for example, like some places that you need to have like strong financial and like basically a CPA, and then other ones you don't.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the other thing I would say too is that, you know, yeah, that it's more about, well, I will say this. One, I do think that sometimes folks disqualify themselves for roles. So they will not.
Like they don't apply?
They don't apply, or they are just like, well, I don't think I have enough budget management experience, or I don't feel like I have enough like policy development experience. And so my thing I'm like, don't disqualify yourself. It is up to the hiring team to kind of dig in on your skills and see if the level of experience you have is what they need for the role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I'm just trying to think of other things I've heard people bring up that they're looking for. Like lately, there's been a bunch of like startup experience, people who have started, they've built something out of nothing before and can tell that story. So again, if somebody was like, okay, my whole goal is to run something one day, what do I need to do? You know, like the Eagle Scout badges, I need to earn as many as possible. The other one that comes up a bunch is like the managing managers, like managing through layers. And, not only can get people to do things, but can manage people who can get people to do things, that not everybody naturally has that. And then fundraising, for anything that's like that, it's just like, and it's, and even fundraising means different things to different people too. Like we both come from, the Perg family of organizations where I think we consider it a major gift to be around $100. Where a lot of people are looking for, tell me the story about the, 6 or 7 figure gift that you've closed. So looking for fundraising opportunities, particularly ones that people kind of cultivated from scratch.
Yeah, that was one question for them. Was like, how do you make the jump from a deputy director or senior leadership to an executive director or CEO? And I think that's the biggest thing. It's like, do you have fundraising experience, and what kind of fundraising experience is that?
Yeah. Although back to your earlier thing of like, I feel like I often just talk candidates at like, just apply. You might not have the experience, but you have all these other things. Because I'm thinking of a couple of CEO searches. By a couple, I literally mean 2 CEO searches that we did recently where they were like, we can coach somebody how to do the fundraising. Like we've got that experience on our board. If they have the potential to ask for money and they're, strong writers and they're, like good presenters, and they're, good at maintaining relationships, we can teach them how. They don't necessarily need to have done it before. But I'm just sharing that as an example of like, sometimes people need it, but sometimes they just need to demonstrate that they have the ability to raise money, because more and more I am seeing people saying, okay, let me outsource the fundraising thing, because you can hire a coach for $10K, $20K and teach the person how to do it, if they've got the potential and the desire.
Yeah, so it's also the case, I think, like just relationship building. So a lot of these, it's some kind of like relationship building. It could be like partnership development. It could be like foundation, institutional fundraising experience, or working with major donors, or working with boards. It's some kind of like building up your relationship building experience, I think, is for the executive director roles is really, really important too.
Yeah. That reminds me, I feel like one of the, I don't know, you add a lot of value, but I just know from talking to you, talking to past clients, but the value of like the storytelling, right? Because someone could be a good relationship builder, but can they actually tell that story of here's somebody who, I don't know, I pulled their name from reading the playbill when I went to the ballet as someone who was interested in the arts. And then, I started following them, and then I got a meeting and they eventually, hosted the thing at their house or whatever it is. But I do think it's not only being the good relationship builder, which is one skill, but it's being able to tell that story in a way that somebody who isn't in your world can understand it. And that just takes, that takes practice.
Yeah, it's kind of like being the spokesperson. Like most executive director roles, it's like you're working primarily outside of the organization to represent the organization, either with, other organizations or with donors or with the public. So that like external spokesperson piece, and not just in like a communications way, but in this like storytelling way.
One thing I'm thinking about is when we do searches, at the very, very end, when we're down to our final 1 or 2 candidates, we'll ask for references. And people, give the names of people who will say glowing things about them. Typically, the way that I like to do it is, we'll call 2 or 3 of them, but then we have ideally the, hiring manager make that important call, like the person who's been managing them for a really long time. And the question is like, look, I know I'm going to hire this person. Or I'm pretty sure I'm going to hire this person. How do I get the most out of them? But anyways, I'm bringing this up now because I just want people to know that we also do secret reference checks, right? We don't want to blow up anybody's life. Like I'm not going to call, if you're applying for a job, I'm not going to call anybody who currently works, where you're working. But for a lot of the jobs, people are looking to hire somebody who comes from the space, which means if they're in the political world, I'm going to know somebody in that world, or, right, their leadership will know somebody in that world. So just this conversation is reminding me of that, because I do think, if you want to highlight your relationship building as a key skill, it's almost like you have your stump speech as you're talking to people of like, look, here are the things that I think I'm great at. I'm trying to land my next thing. Who have you been impressed with? I just want to work with great people and I want to make a difference. Who have you been impressed with? Who's doing really great work? But that helps. So when these secret reference checks happen, if they're coming back to someone, I just think about them as a great relationship builder. I'm like, ding, like that's all I needed to hear. The job is theirs.
Yeah. Well, it's another reason why the networking is really important too, because the more that they're just trusted folks, like that are just like saying that they worked with the person or they've seen them in action or they hear that they're in the process, that's really great. Like that can be really helpful.
Yeah.
So even talking to people that maybe aren't on the hiring team, but just work at the organization, like that's still really, really valuable. So this is another along the same lines. It was like this person said many director positions today provide valuable experience in like strategic leadership, communication, storytelling, internal management. But folks are individual contributors. But they said, recruiters often seek C-suite candidates with supervisory experience. So how can I leverage my comprehensive experience to bridge this gap?
It's tricky. Part of me is like, you can't, but let me think about it more. I don't know. Do you want to kick this one off?
So the way there's nothing you can do if you don't have X thing.
Right.
Like, I'm like, so if they're like, you need to have managed teams of 6 or more, and you have not done that, like that could potentially be a deal breaker. Like there's some litmus test. And so this is another reason why I'm like, just talk to people before applying, because you can talk to them and be like, hey, listen, I haven't actually managed those people, but I've managed an entire department and did a lot of like cross-departmental collaboration and had to manage projects where I had to get people that I don't have hire and fire, supervisory experience over to like do these big initiatives. Will that work for you? And so you can check that would be the main thing I would say. It's like, let's check in and see if your experience will fit. And then the other piece is you need to tell the story of like how you've run and managed big initiatives and who that meant working with and how you got people to like come together to do the thing. And I think that's the best way forward.
Yeah, I like all of that. The like story around what you've done. I also just like the upfront, like, look, if you need somebody who's managed 6 people, that's not me. But if you need somebody who can hold responsibility, get people to do things, keep it complicated, manage up and, laterally, I can do that. And here's why. But it just keeps coming back. It's interesting having this conversation because it just keeps coming back to knowing your strengths and having them written out in a way that you can convince other people that they're your strengths. And this notion of like reaching out to people and having conversations. Like it's I could also see this coming up around language requirements, maybe not for a C-suite level role, but like there's some roles where they really want a Spanish speaker. But do they really want a Spanish speaker, or do they just need somebody who can understand somebody in Spanish? But maybe they can't write in Spanish. Like sometimes the Spanish fluency, there's, some wiggle room around.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are things that hiring teams are willing to compromise on.
Right.
And then there are certain things that they're not. And so sometimes you just might want to have a conversation to see. Like, I think around it of like the multi-entity experience, like is like, do you need to have PAC experience, or is having C3 and C4 experience enough?
Right.
Like, or fundraising, like I have strong institutional giving experience, but not as much major donor. Is that okay?
Yeah.
The other
pitfall, I think, would be like, if you're waiting forever to talk to somebody and for whatever reason you can't, I think I would still apply, like, right? At some point, I know we're saying like, don't apply and it's all about network, but at some point, yes. Obviously there's like the perfect way to do it. And then there's the, thing that actually sometimes ends up happening.
Right. Yeah. Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. I always tell folks, I was like, if it's a high priority job for you, like send the networking requests out and then start working on the application, because you're going to send the application in regardless. But you want to try to talk to people first. So here's a question I thought was, I mean, you mentioned it a little bit, but there's a few different people that submitted questions around DEI. And they were like, is it going away? Should I come hide my DEI work-related experience? What is your answer to that? I know my answer.
I'm curious to hear what you think. In my world of progressive politics, I do not think it's going away. I do not think you should hide your experience. But that being said, I might, if I was looking at a job where there's no mention of DEI in the job description at all, I might downplay it a little bit, or I might use different words. But I can't imagine it. Yeah, I don't think it's going anywhere.
Yeah. So I have two thoughts on it. It's not going away. There are definitely, it is a big priority for a lot of the organizations that I know that NRG is working with. Like, that has not changed. But I do think you're right about, go to the organization's website and read how they talk about it. Read how they talk about it in the job description. Like, the job description is your roadmap for how they're talking about the work. The other thing I'll say, though, is especially for C-suite roles, you are interviewing the organization as much as they are interviewing you. And so if you as a leader could not handle being in an organization that is not prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, then put that stuff in your resume. Because that's almost like saying hey, listen, this is me. This is what is important to me. And if you have a problem with that, then it's not a good fit.
Right.
You are evaluating them as much as they're evaluating you. The other question someone had was about something about them as a protected status. So they were liking someone who, with a disability, or, I think about this a lot. I am a mom with young school-age kids. And my kind of take on that is you should not reveal anything that they should not be legally thinking about in the interview process. Unless it helps you. If it's vote mama, then maybe I'll talk about how I'm a mom. But is there anything else you think folks should think about when it comes to this?
No, it's interesting though, thinking about those two questions back to back, because for me, the mom, I'm also a mom with kids the exact same age as your kids, and that, I would only want to work someplace where it would be totally fine for me to zip out and drive a kid to gymnastics, or take a kid to an orthodontist appointment. So I'd want that to come out just as just you be you, and they'll figure out if it's the right fit. And you'll also figure out if it's the right fit. I would want that to come out. Yeah.
I always encourage folks, that's what you do the networking for.
Uh-huh.
To be okay, no, but really, what is it being a working parent there? Really? Is it okay if I need to take off because I got a call from the school that I need to go get the kid? And we want, I trust that people are good and they will do their best to answer honestly. But I think talking to people at the org who are living with it is the best way to suss out that work-life balance stuff too. Well, I think we are almost at the end of our time. But there's lots of more questions.
I know. All right, we should grab more time and do 2.0. Is there any one is there any one more that we should do?
This is more about this moment in time. So maybe we should do this.
Yeah.
Okay, so here is, so I am in the Richmond metro area, which is very close to DC, but all of the federal layoffs are not only impacting folks in DC, but I know I've talked to people in Boston and California and everywhere in between that are being impacted by the layoffs. So someone wrote in there specifically about USAID. They were saying, given the current influx of candidates from USAID and like other federal layoffs in the DC area, I'm aware it'll be difficult kind of maintaining an executive level role. So there's this question about like, do you pursue the C-suite level roles right now, or kind of like oscillating? It's like the fear, right? Like, do you hold out for the role that you know that you want and are qualified for? Or do you consider roles that are not ideal, that pay less, are a leadership level down? So how do you kind of stay true to yourself while trying to figure out what to do in this moment to, keep the lights on, the very real responsibilities that you have?
It's a little tricky to answer. I think it's just a personal question of, how long can you go on the severance, or how long can you go on, living off of fumes or savings? One thing I find that I've said to people in the past is like, don't make decisions until you get job offers. So I kind of like the idea of both applying for the, the dream job, but it's not freaking perfect, but there's some things about it that I kind of like. And I'm like, just get in there and apply and see where things go. Because some of those times, those lower tier jobs can turn into consulting opportunities, if you can get healthcare elsewhere. And, because if you're going to hire someone at 125, you're going to actually pay them 150. So then maybe you can become a consultant at, whatever, 12K a month. Like it really gets into what people need. But I like the, just don't make any decisions early in the process.
Yeah, I would like try to avoid applying from a place of scarcity. The other thing I would say is like, some folks will want to take on the like lower paying role or consulting work to I talk about like as lengthening your runway. So like, yeah, but it is like, it's a personal risk tolerance of like, okay, like how long can you go? What does that look like? But I would encourage folks, especially at the C-suite level, to be like open to consulting opportunities that can just kind of help lengthen the runway, because these C-suite level searches take longer. Mm-hmm. And this moment in time, there's just a lot of uncertainty too. So it's like, it's going to take a little bit longer. So like if you can take on work, part-time work that allows you to lengthen your runway, that can be really helpful for folks and kind of take the pressure off, I think, of feeling like you need to be applying for jobs that you don't really want. The other thing I would say is that like networking around your ideal next role and also being open to consulting opportunities are not in conflict with one another. Like you should use those conversations to talk to people about like both things that you're interested in. So yeah, it's tricky, but I would say like look for opportunities where you can.
Yeah. All right. I know we have to wrap up. If we wanted to leave people with like, what would be your like, okay, we spent the last 45 minutes talking about it. Here's like 1 to 2 things I'll leave you with. What would you say?
I think one is that you have to figure out your sustainable pace to be able to network with as many people as possible and to start early when looking for executive roles.
Yeah, I like that. For me, it's just going to take a really long time. So just be ready for it. Try as much as you can to kind of enjoy the ride and the opportunity to have virtual coffees and in-person coffees. And then the second thing that's pretty clear in this conversation is like the story that you're telling, right? Even if your experience might not be exactly what they want, your ability to tell the story of here's how I've got the qualities they're looking for, I think just goes a long way. All right, let's have 2.0 of this conversation because it's super fun to just hang out with you and geek out about everything hiring related.
I know, yeah. Well, thanks, Naomi.
Talk soon. Bye now.